Hello everybody and welcome back to the Storm Poker Challenge for mybet.com. This is Dylan, and in this 7th and final episode of our Riders of the Storm series, we'll look in great detail at both the short stack and mid stack strategies that I had mentioned in previous videos. And before we get there, we'll also look at a comment from one of our viewers at YouTube who had requested that we look at a couple of 4-betting and 5-betting scenarios when you're holding Ace-King.
Riders on the storm, riders on the storm, into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown.
So before we get into what I've coined as the hybrid strategy for mid-stack play at both the full ring and 6-max tables, I want to directly address a comment that was made by one of our viewers at YouTube, which was very fitting actually to conclude all of our strategy videos on big stack play as such. And what this individual had asked is that I look at or post basically a few hands where I'm holding Ace-King, either suited or off-suited, and I'm facing either a 3-bet or a 4-bet, and how that then looks when you shove over the top all in for a full 100 big blinds. And that's a really fantastic request, also quite complicated, and we'll get into the details concerning that because it is so very crucial for 2 points. One is determining your expected value on any given move. This is something that I think even some very advanced players don't properly understand, and it is a very crucial concept for expert level play. In order to understand expected value, one of the key concepts involved in expected value is then fold equity. So there's equity as such, which is very simply put your share of any given pot based on the strength of your hand in relation to either your opponent's hands or ranges of hands. That is equity in a nutshell. Fold equity is, as you see here on the slide below, very simply put, the probability that your opponent will fold. Now, why is this important? Well, if you are looking at what any given bet, raise, or shove all in will look like for your bottom line, basically, for your bankroll in the long run, you have to understand both of these concepts, right? You have to understand equity, you have to understand fold equity, and you have to understand how these two then combine to produce your expected value for that move. So if you guys go to YouTube and you then search for Storm Poker Challenge number 3B, that's the video where the comment was posted, or basically you go to the MyBet channel at YouTube. You will then land here, and what you can do is from the feed, either the feed or from the uploads, you can then come down here and find all the different videos that we've produced here for the Riders of the Storm series. You go here to Storm Poker Challenge number 3B and you then come to basically the video itself, and that's where this comment was posted. And it's actually important that we look at this in detail so that you guys know exactly what was meant. And actually, before we get into the details themselves, and there was another post here from this person asking if I live in Berlin, and as a matter of fact, as of the publication of this video, I am living in Berlin, but that may or may not be the case by the time it hits YouTube or Facebook. And okay, quickly to that, the comment itself was right here, the request. And good to be the king here, he asks if I could actually post some Ace-King versus 3-bets and 4-bets in future videos. He's saying that he typically shoves 100 big blind stacks, right? So big stack strategy, and it hasn't been working out lately. And he posts here great vids. Again, thanks to all of you guys for your feedback, all your comments on the videos. It's all been quite positive. We appreciate that, and in the future, and this is the last video of the Riders of the Storm series, but in the future we plan to do hopefully quite a few more series, and we will base that on your feedback, actually what you guys want to learn. But anyways, thank you for the compliments. Appreciate it. Hope you guys got a lot out of it as always. And I won't, unfortunately, be able to reply directly to all these comments, but this one was so fitting for our purposes, and basically rounding off big stack strategy play as such with expected value calculations. So again, thanks to both of you guys. And I wrote back here that basically the request is itself very simple, but the answer is extremely complicated because there's so many different factors that come into play here. Whether you're in a heads-up pot, multi-way pot, what the previous action was, what the effective stacks are, stuff like that. And you guys can just pause the video and read through this at your leisure. Yeah, that was the very brief answer that I gave him here for lack of space. Then I posted some general ranges when you're holding ace king versus different 3-bet ranges, for example. And yeah, that's how that looks in general. And now I will go into the very specific details of how to actually work this out, right? Final point here was, again, thanks. And he's saying that he's usually 4-bet shoving if the villain's 3-bet percentage is 7% or more. So that's important. We're going to keep that in mind as we move forward. So before we get into the actual expected value calculations, there are a few things that you guys really need to know. And this is actually fundamental knowledge for all players out there who want to become experts in the shortest amount of time. It's going to be a bit math intensive, but I'll try and keep this as brief as possible and as simple as possible so that you guys can get the principles of it and then apply that at the tables. Right? You don't have to be a math whiz to understand expected value. You don't have to be a math whiz to understand fold equity. Although it's good that you have a general grasp of how it functions, right? At least intuitively. So first and foremost, you guys got to understand there are a total of 1,326 combinations that you, the hero, we use the term hero, especially in online poker terms, for the player from the player's perspective, right? That means you. And there are 1,225 combinations of hole cards that your opponent, the so-called villain, can receive when you then know 2 of the 52 cards in the deck, right? So from a 52 card deck, there are 1,326 ways you can get your pocket cards. And your villain then, when you know 2 cards of those 52, has in 1,225 different ways to receive his pocket cards. That expresses hands is 169 total pre-flop hands in Texas Hold'em. Pocket pairs. There are 6 combinations of receiving any given pocket pair. So there's 6 ways to receive a pair of aces, ace of diamonds, ace of spades, ace of diamonds, ace of clubs, down the line. So when you hold ace king, you're removing some of the different ways that your opponent can receive, for example, a pair of aces or a pair of kings. And in this case, with the so-called card removal, he or she doesn't have 6 combinations or ways of receiving a pocket pair, rather only 3 for a pair of aces or a pair of kings. Of course, all of the pairs still have the 6 combinations, right? Now, that's important to know when you're considering fold equity. All right, so again, different ways to calculate this, but this is a general overview, and I hope that's clear. So when you hold any given hand, you've got to reduce the total number of combinations respectively for what your actual holding is. Good. Non-pairs. That means any non-paired pre-flop hand in Texas Hold'em again. Suited. There are 4 combinations of receiving that. So, for example, ace and king of spades, diamonds, clubs, and hearts. Now, if you hold an off-suited ace king, right, there are no longer 4 combinations, rather 3. Right, 4 whole cards involving the 2 that you already have in your hand. And again, guys, if this isn't clear, just drop me a quick line. But I think for most of you guys out there, that will be clear. Non-paired off-suited is in 12 combos with the card removal concerning hands that have an ace or a king in them. There are now only 9 combos. So that's essentially how you can make the different hands in Texas Hold'em and how the card removal functions, right, for the total hands that would include an ace and a king when you're actually holding ace king yourself. So this 169 total pre-flop hands I'd like to look at just briefly in Poker Stove to show you guys how that looks. So this may be old news for a lot of you guys out there watching this video, but it'll definitely be informative for a lot of players especially novice and recreational players really looking to increase their level and get to expert play in the shortest amount of time. So what you guys see here in PokerStove is basically a 13 by 13 grid, and all of the O's mean off-suited cards, and all the S's mean suited cards, all right? And you've got the pairs down the middle. So it's 13 by 13, that's exactly 169 hands, and that's how that works out. And very briefly before we move forward, you know, the ranges, you can, as I've shown you guys in previous videos, you can actually use this bar here to move that, and then PokerStove will default the different hands above, right, according to that percentage. So this 9.2% range, this can also be the same range. Let's just go ahead and put in any pair, drop off some of this nonsense, right, and look at that. You're at exactly the same percentage, but with a range that's highly weighted towards pocket pairs. Alright, so just be careful with that. The percentage can be deceiving, okay, depending on the player you're facing. So this 9.2% is this range, right? It's also this range. So again, guys, just keep that in mind when you're looking at percentages, especially when you're using statistics online, HUD stats, stuff like that. This 9%, you know, or 5%, or whatever you're looking at for your villain, concerning in our case 3-bet or 4-betting, that can be markedly different depending on the player, depending on the previous action, depending on the position. Please take all of that into consideration. Very, very good. And that is, I think, all you need to know right now for us to move forward. So concerning fold equity, okay, again, the probability your opponent will fold. There are different ways to calculate that. Doesn't really matter as long as you get to the right result. And I put here 3 different ways you can look at fold equity or calculating it. So FE is, of course, the abbreviation for that. This is an example where you steal raise from the small blind. Okay, so it's folded around to you. Doesn't matter, either 6 max or full ring, but everybody folds and you're on in the small blind and you raise it up. What's the probability your opponent's going to fold? Well, one way of calculating fold equity is looking at the entire number of combinations that he could have. Right, you see your 2 cards, and we'll just stay with the ace-king example here. You see your 2 cards, so he's got 1,225 different combinations that he could theoretically have. That, subtracted by the number of hands that he will call, divided by the total number of hands, equals your fold equity, i.e. the probability that he will fold his hands. So, if he has a very wide range, whatever, let's say 400 calling hands, right, it's going to be 1225 minus 400 divided by 1225, and that's going to give you the percentage that he's going to fold. Let's look at point B here, which is going to be the very concrete example that we'll analyze initially in our calculators, and that's the situation where you 2-bet, okay, so you make this open raise, and your opponent then re-raises, so he makes or she makes a 3-bet, and you come over the top, you push all in as a 4-bet with ace-king, and the way you figure out the fold equity, that means the amount or the percentage that your opponent will fold versus your 4-bet shove, your 4-bet push all in. And that's essentially taking all of the different hands, the combinations of his re-raise, okay, and then also understanding or assuming, in our case, the number of hands that he will call with versus your 4-bet, and you basically take the smaller of the 2, divided by his re-raise or his 3-bet combinations, and that's how you get the fold equity. So 1 minus the 4-bet calling hands divided by the 3-bet re-raise combinations. And you guys see here, I put hands here. Hands and combinations we'll just use more or less interchangeably. Option C, which I like quite a bit because it's very simple, but you have to be a little bit careful. A lot of guys use online statistics and they don't really know what to do with the numbers, or they read them incorrectly. And so you've really got to, when you're using HUD stats, guys, again, please take position into consideration, take previous action into consideration. Don't just look at PFR, for example. That's going to be the entire average of all your opponent's raises, right, from all positions. You got to look at that little pop-up that shows you, okay, he's raising X percentage from this position, X from this position, he's re-raising X% from this position, in and out of position, etc. It gets quite complicated. But there are stats that are very exact, and I've listed two. One is the 3-bet percentage per position, guys, per position. Alright, this is also, if you look at normal 3-bet percentages, there's also a statistic that's just his entire average of 3-betting total. You also have to markedly adjust that percentage when you're looking at 3-betting in steals and re-steal scenarios, right? And all these terms, guys, we've covered in all the previous videos, so if this is a bit too much right now, please start from the beginning. We cover all this kind of stuff slowly, and yeah, we just say Storm Poker Challenge 01, start there, maybe 02A, and then yeah, move forward. But again, 3-betting pre-flop is just a re-raise. Alright, definitely take the position of the given action into consideration when you are actually determining what your expected value will be for your move. And the more information you have, the more correct information you have, the higher your expectation will be in general. 4-bet shove expected value is what we're going to analyze right now. And I'm going to use, again, this fold equity formula, 1 minus the opponent's total 4-bet calling combinations, divided by his total 3-bet combinations. You can also do this exact same calculation, come out to exactly the same figure by basically taking his total 3-bets, right, total combinations in his 3-bet range, minus the total combinations of his 4-bet calling range, and you divide that basically by the total combinations in his 3-bet range. You get exactly the same number. So example 1, we've got a heads-up equity matchup for 4-bet shoving, and the approximate equity, EQ, when holding ace of diamonds and king of hearts. We're going to get very specific here, versus the following ranges. So if you look over in your HUD stats, and again, guys, at the Storm tables, we don't have our statistics. It's unfortunate right now, but in the near future, I'm sure you will, and definitely at ring games, tournaments, stuff like that. So let's say we've got our Hold'em Manager stats up, right? We've got our heads-up display, the so-called HUD, and it's displaying all the different statistics for our opponents. And we make a 2-bet, so we raise open with ace of diamonds, king of hearts. Our opponent re-raises pre-flop. He makes it a 3-bet. Alright, and we look at his position in the heads-up stats in the HUD display, and we see a 3% 3-bet number. So what does this 3% actually mean? If you take the top 3% of all Texas Hold'em hands, most people will default it to jacks or better or ace king. And again, I'm going to go to PokerStove to show you guys how that can be a bit different depending on your player. It doesn't mean this person's 3-bet range can also include some bluff, stuff like that. But when it's the smaller the percentage is, guys, the more you need to be thinking in this area concerning what he's actually re-raising. So 3%, let's have a look. This is the range that I just put in, exactly 3%. Alright, 3% can also be 8s or better, not even including the ace king. Alright, it can only be ace king suited, right? And 10s or better, also possible. It can only be maybe queens or better, ace king, and maybe let's throw in the ace queen suited, right? Changes your equity subtly versus your specific holding, which in our case again is the ace king offsuit. And yes, alright, so that's 3%. You can also, which is a very neat feature here, you can also just type in 3%, hit tab, and that defaults in PokerStove here to 9s or better, ace king suited, as we just had. You can, of course, clear that, scroll it over, and then make your changes as you like. Right, so that's how you can play with this a bit, guys. Get different ranges. Then you come over here to basically evaluate, and you see that ace king offsuit versus 9s or better, ace queen suited only has more or less 42% to the river if both of you guys push all in. What is equity? Again, that is very simply put the share of the pot when it all gets in the middle. Let's take a concrete example here. You and I both have 100 big blinds. We're playing NL 100, so we both have 100 US dollars in our stacks. I 2-bet, you 3-bet with this range, and I 4-bet all in, and you call me. Alright, and actually on, let's say, a pair of nines. You actually call really wide with a pair of nines exactly. Alright, you're actually ahead, which is a normal matchup, as I showed you. Yeah, I showed you guys, I think in the second episode of the series, that when you have a pair versus two overcards, it's very often a 10% difference. Yeah, the pair is very often basically at 55% versus 45% for the overcards. Good. If it's suited, it's a bit better. But how much? You guys remember? Right, only about 3 to 4%. Have a look at this. Okay, that didn't change a lot. I mean, you're still flipping, you're still behind. But when you're suited, guys, don't think that that makes your hand much stronger. It's literally 3 to 4% on average, not more. So the suitedness of your hand could add a couple percentage points there for your equity, but yeah, no big deal. Anyway, so we shove all in with our ace-king offsuit, 4-betting, and you call us actually relatively light for a shove, a 4-bet shove of that size with a pair of nines. You're actually ahead versus the actual holding. Alright, so $200 goes in the middle. This guy's going to take down 110 and change, and I'm going to take down then my 90, a little under 90. And that's how that works, guys. That's equity versus specific hands. Alright, equity being basically the share of the pot after it goes all in the middle, less the rake. Very good. We've got 3%, and we're going to assume these ranges, guys. So with these calculations, again, that's why I couldn't answer good to be the king there specifically in the YouTube comment, because it is so complex. In general, we're going to make some assumptions, and we're going to then simplify the hell out of that once we get to the calculator. So we've got a guy on a 3% range. We look at his HUD stats. We see, okay, it's 3% for 3-betting in position versus my mid-position open raise with ace-king offsuit. Good. We see 3%. What does that mean concerning combinations? Well, there are 40 combinations. Why is that? Well, 6 ways to make a pair of jacks, 6 ways to make a pair of queens, kings and aces, right? But we saw that, of course, when we're holding ace-king, that reduces the total number of aces and kings he could have, right? Pairs of aces and kings, and also reduces the total combinations of the same hand that we actually hold. So without the card removal effect, that's 40 combinations total. So basically, jack, queen, king, and aces. That's 4 times 6, 24, plus 16 different ways of making any ace-king is then 40 total combinations. However, we hold the ace-king, we know that. So his total hands or total combinations that he could have are then 27. That's a card removal effect, so called card removal, as I've underlined here. Fantastic. If he 3-bets and always calls, that means he calls 100% of his re-raise range pre-flop when we shove over the top, we're going to have an equity with our hand, ace-king, ace of diamonds, king of hearts, versus that entire range right at 39.8%. And again, guys, please don't believe a single word I'm saying, but check it out, right? Any coach tells you something, don't just buy it. Check it out. How can you test this? How can you check it? Well, good old poker stuff. So yet again, we've got player 2. We're going to put him on jacks or better, or ace-king, apply, versus our ace of diamonds, king of hearts. Lo and behold, 39.785% is our probability of winning this hand, and also the share of our pot when he never folds. Alright, so that's our equity. Now, if, however, we don't think he's going to call with jacks, and we don't think he's going to call us down with ace-king when we 4-bet over the top, he's only going to call us, our assumption is that he's only going to call us with queens or better. It means a pair of queens, kings, or aces. That range is 1.4%. Alright, so if you're using HUD stats, for example, you'd see maybe, 4-bet call percentage of exactly this, maybe 1, maybe 1.5, whatever. Good, so we then assume that he's calling us with this range. Alright, 6 different ways of making each pair equals 18 total hands or combinations. However, we have the card removal effect for the kings and aces. So from a total normal 18 different ways of basically making this range, it's now only 12. And what does that mean for our equity? Well, if we shove with, again, the ace of diamonds, king of hearts, and we assume that he's only going to call us with queens or better, when he does call us, we're going to have only about 31% to the river concerning our probability of taking down that hand or taking down that pot. And that's how this works. So this is actual equity. That means our actual hand versus the entire range that our opponent is playing. So his 3-bet range we see here at 3%. We see his 4-bet calling range at 1.4%. So we assume that he's re-raising our open raise, our 2-bet, with jacks or better ace king, and he's only going to call us down with queens, kings, or aces. That means he's going to fold the ace kings and the jacks within this range. So he's raising this and he's only calling this versus our shove. Alright. How do you determine the fold equity? Well, again, this is the way I prefer it, guys. 1 minus the total calling hands divided by the total raising hands. I think that's the simplest way to do it. It works for me somehow. So, and the other good thing is, when I look at this, 18 divided by 40, I can also see that it's more or less 1 to 2, right, or 2 to 1. So I know that he's more or less folding a bit more than half of his range. That's kind of how I guesstimate it. All right, I think that's a good tip, just the beginning of this, so that you guys know how that works. So, if I'm thinking, yeah, he's pitching in 22 of the 40 hands, good. His fold equity or my fold equity, the probability he's going to fold is just over 50%. That's good enough for me. The very exact calculation is 55%. All right, so he's folding exactly 55% of his 3-bet range, his re-raise range pre-flop. What does that mean with the card removal? The tighter the range is, well, okay, it depends on your holding too, but the tighter the range is when you're holding ace king, the less the card removal will change your fold equity. In this case, it's only 0.56% difference. So again, yeah, the tighter the range is, and the stronger you're holding, then yeah, the less the card removal effect will affect your actual fold equity. However, the wider these 3-bet ranges are, and in 6-max play with a lot of live players, the 3-bet's going to be much wider than 3%, and especially in steals and re-steals, right? Blind battles, stuff like that. I mean, you may even see 10 and 12, maybe 15% 3-bets, and that's going to be a marked difference concerning the calculations. We'll look at a couple of those here in just a sec. All right, so recap, guys. This is our scenario, our actual scenario. We hold ace of diamonds, king of hearts, and we get re-raised pre-flop, and we see a 3% 3-bet for our one opponent, and we put him on jacks or better ace king. We come over the top, we 4-bet, and good to be the king's question is when I 4-bet then, or 5-bet, but in this case 4-bet with 100 big blinds, what does that look like? Good. We 4-bet over the top. We think he's going to call us with queens or better, a range of 1.4%. When he does so, we're going to have just at 31% equity to the river. We assume that if he's raising this and only calling with this, that our fold equity will be right at 55-56%. Now, there's an approximation to the fold equity, which I just kind of mentioned. It's 1 minus the 4-bet calling percentage divided by the total 3-bet percentage equals, yeah, again, 0.14 divided by 3 at 53.3%. Now, that isn't that far off. All right, so if I'm just playing, let's say I'm playing 5, 6, 10 tables, and even fewer, whatever, and I don't have time to get in here and actually mentally, calculate, okay, how many combinations are included in his pairs for this range, how many combinations are included in his non-suited non-pairs, his suited pair, non-pairs, whatever. I'm not going to do that on the fly. All right, if I'm playing live poker, yeah, maybe. But again, there I'll probably just guesstimate. And the really good approximation is exactly this: look at the percentage, right, that he opens with or that he re-raises with. Look at the percentage that you assume he'll call with, and basically divide the two. So I'm seeing 1.5 and 3, right? That's half of it, more or less half of his range he's folding, more or less. Again, it's an approximation, guys. This ace-king is 16 combinations, whereas pairs are only 6, right? So if you assume that his calling range is highly weighted towards calling with pairs, when he's folding all ace-kings and ace-queens, that can be a really big difference, actually. So again, this is an approximation, and I use it myself on the fly. I think it's useful for you guys. if you don't want to get into all this nonsense with combinations and card removal and yeah, different ranges, stuff like that, in general, take his open range, divide it by, or other way around, take his calling range, divide it by his open range, and you're going to get more or less the fold equity. Right? It's approximation, guys. Please don't quote me out of context, but it's close enough in many cases. All right, example 2. We 2-bet, we open raise with our ace of diamonds, king of hearts. Villain 3-bets, he re-raises, and this time he's on more of a laggy 3-bet range. All right, so 8.4%, which we have defaulted, we have assumed is a pair of 7s or better, ace-jack or better, that means ace-jack, ace-queen, or ace-king, and any king-queen, that means suited or off-suited. If our opponent never folds, so he raises this, he 3-bets this, or he re-raises us with 7s or better, ace-jack or better, or king-queen, and he never folds. Alright, so his 3-bet is exactly his 4-bet calling percentage. Our equity versus that entire range when holding ace of diamonds, king of hearts is 55%. So in a heads-up pot, we're good to go. Now, if we think he will fold quite a bit of that, right, he'll only call us down with 10s or better, or ace-queen or better, then we're going to see in his 4-bet calling range as a percentage 4.7. Now, our equity versus that entire range with the ace-king is 49%. Still good in a heads-up pot given the dead money. So what does the fold equity calculation look like in this scenario? Our villain 3-bets at 8.5% more or less. Right, we put him on 7s or better, ace-jack or better, king-queen. And he's going to call us down with any pair of 10s or better, any ace-queen, any ace-king. Alright, quick pop quiz. We've got how many pairs here with the calling range, the 4-bet call range? We've got 10s, jacks, queens, kings, and aces. It's 5 total pairs times 6 combinations is 30 hands. Now, any non-paired whole cards are 16 total combinations. So that's going to be ace-queen or ace-king, 16 a pop at 32, hence the 62 total hands. So 32 total combinations for this range, ace-queens or ace-kings, offsuit or suit, and any pair of 10s, any pair of jacks, queens, kings, or aces. It's a total of 62 hands that he'll call us with. However, he raised with 112. So of the 112, he is calling, not half, but a bit over half in this case. And that comes out to what he's folding at right at 45%. So he's going to fold about 45% of this entire range here when he calls us with 10s or better, ace-queen. That does look different with our card removal, doesn't it? Because we've got ace of diamonds, king of hearts in our hand, we know that. So the card removal is not 62 hands for his calling range, rather 45, not 112 for his 3-bet range, rather 87. And you're seeing here, guys, the wider they go, the more they're folding, the more that card removal effect will have a relatively big difference, actually, on your total expected value calculation that we'll get into here shortly. So instead of 44.6% fold equity that we would assume, in actuality, when we know our whole cards, and we assume that these ranges are correct, then our fold equity is not, again, 44.6%, rather over 48%, and that's pretty big. So keep that in mind, guys. The card removal does have a difference on the fold equity calculation. However, the equity calculation, that means just your hand versus that range, remains the same because this card removal effect has been factored in, at least as far as I can see with poker stuff. So the final point here on the slide is very, very important, and it's also in direct connection with what Good to Be the King posted there, his last comment, saying that he is generally shoving, 4-bet shoving over the top with ace-king when his opponent is 3-betting at 7% or more. That's what he meant with that. And here I'm just going to say in general for everybody watching this video, with HUD stats, heads-up display stats, right? I use Hold'em Manager myself, brilliant program. You just really got to be careful, and you got to be clear on the position, right? You got to be clear on the percentage that this guy's 3-betting and 4-betting and 5-betting, from the given position with the given action, and more importantly, you have to have a relatively high sample size, so-called N, to really start putting faith in those numbers, really start trusting those numbers that you see then in your statistics. So that means if you've got a really tight player and you've only got, let's say, 1,000 hands on the guy, you're not going to see a whole lot of 4-bet stats and 5-bet stats in general. If you got a lag, you're going to see some pretty high numbers already within the first 100 hands, right? So you've got to, you know, I've done an entire series, guys, on poker math. It's entitled "The Essentials Made Easy." If you're into this kind of stuff, definitely check that out. But more importantly, is a series that I did on player profiling, right? And that's basically understanding the numbers in online play, and then, yeah, all the nonverbal communication going on in the live environment. Definitely check those out when you guys get a chance. But again, as a general point, the HUD stats, guys, the higher the sample size, the higher the N, the more you can trust these numbers. The lower the N, the more you've got to be really, really careful, right? Because this percentage, right, i.e. range, is going to change markedly depending on the sample size, depending on the opponent, depending on the position, depending on the action, and again, always take into consideration if you're in a steal-re-steal scenario or a blind battle. And the call range is also going to be much wider because they know that you in the blinds are going to be re-stealing, re-raising, 3-betting with a much wider range very often than this. If a guy is raising, let's say, 15%, a lot of guys are going to re-steal this. Any suited Broadway king, queen would definitely be on the list. You know, stuff like this, and they're going to throw in some suited connectors. They're going to throw in some one-gap suited connectors here, right? It may even be 3-betting as a re-steal up to 18, 19, 20%, depending on the history and stuff like that. Yeah, just be ready for that, right? And all of a sudden you got your ace-king still versus that 3-bet, and now you shove and you're at 56%. So again, it's all relative, guys. It's all situationally conditioned. It's all conditioned by the opponents, and these are different things that you guys should definitely keep in mind as we move forward here with the actual calculations. Again, this is Dylan. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely hope it was useful for your games. Till then, on behalf of the entire team here, all the best, and best of luck at the tables.